And with that, let's now shift focus over to North Korea and Russia. According to reports, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un may meet Russian President Vladimir Putin this month. And according to a US national security official, the meeting will be focused on a potential arms deal. North Korea might be planning to crack an arms deal with Russia only to help the country in its war with Ukraine. Interestingly, both nations are countering Washington together. Let's also look into how worrying is the new possible alliance. Amid reports that Kim Jong-un soon plans to travel to Russia, it will be interesting to note that it will be his first visit abroad in over 4 years. The possible meeting comes soon after the White House said that arms negotiations between the two countries were actively advancing. In return, North Korea is expecting to refill its food and energy shipments and transfer of sophisticated weapons technologies. Now, a key worry is that Chairman Kim may ask Mr. Putin to provide him with advanced weapons technology or knowledge to help him make breakthroughs in his nuclear weapons program. The US National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said that Russia's Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu had tried to convince Pyongyang to sell artillery ammunition to Russia, this during his significant recent visit to North Korea in July. However, it might be more likely that neither want this deal to be a public affair. As Russia's isolation over the war has grown, Moscow is looking for new friends. Meanwhile, amid sanctions, North Korea is looking forward to some economic assistance after opening its doors for the first time since COVID. Here's a report.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un seems set to meet with President Vladimir Putin on Russian soil. A US national security official says they're expected to discuss potential arms deals. But what can we expect from the talks? The trip would be Kim's first visit abroad in over 4 years. He's expected to visit Russia's far eastern port city of Vladivostok by armoured train. It's likely to take almost a full day to travel over 600 miles across the border, taking account of the North's sometimes archaic rail network. Relations with Russia haven't always been as warm as they were during the height of the Soviet Union, but the country is now reaping clear benefits from Moscow's need for friends. Since Kim first met Putin in 2019, Russia has opposed new sanctions on North Korea, blocking a US-led push and publicly splitting the UN Security Council. North Korea expert at Seoul's Kookmin University, Andrei Lankov, thinks Kim wants to emphasize a sense of Russian backing.
Kim Jong-un will try to get some kind of economic assistance, politically motivated economic assistance from Russia. Maybe he will get some promises, but I don't think he will get much of real stuff because for Russia it's a rather marginal concern. So probably North Koreans should not expect to get much aid and assistance, but opportunity to make money by sending their workers overseas and maybe some limited military cooperation. But what is important is a show.
The most striking sign of recent deepening ties came in July, when Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu visited Pyongyang. He toured a weapons exhibit that included the North's banned ballistic missiles and saluted weapons as they rolled by during a parade. The war in Ukraine has likely strengthened recent ties between Russia and North Korea too. As Russia's isolation over the war has grown, analysts say it has seen increasing value in North Korea. Here's Patricia Lewis, the head of British think tank Chatham House's International Security Programme.
What's, I think, very interesting from the perspective of the Russia's war against Ukraine is that Russia clearly is needing to offer something to North Korea to get ammunition. It's not just straightforward, just purchase. And I would say as well that what we have seen too is that they're not getting what they need from China, which I think is very interesting.
North Korea has reciprocated Putin's most recent displays of support by backing Moscow after Russia invaded Ukraine.
This is not going to reflect well on North Korea, and they will pay a price for this.
The US accuses the North of providing arms to Russia, but it's unclear whether any deliveries have been made. Both countries deny those claims. The vast majority of North Korea's trade goes through China. But experts say Russia is a potentially important partner as well. Last year, Russia and North Korea restarted train travel for the first time since railway journeys were cut during the global health crisis. United Nations data also shows that Russia resumed oil exports to North Korea, the first such shipment reported since 2020. Moscow denies breaking UN sanctions, but Russian tankers have been accused of helping evade caps on exporting oil to North Korea. Russian officials have openly discussed working on political arrangements to employ thousands of North Korean labourers, despite UN resolutions that ban such practices. Russian officials and leaders in occupied regions of Ukraine have also hinted at having North Korean workers help rebuild war-torn areas.
For its war in Ukraine, that those discussions are actively advancing.
Arms talks between Russia and North Korea are actively advancing. That's according to U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan on Tuesday, after reports that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un plans to visit Russia. Sullivan also sent a stern warning against the possibility of supplying Moscow with arms for use in Ukraine.
Providing weapons to Russia for use on the battlefield to attack grain silos and the heating infrastructure of major cities as we head into winter, to try to conquer territory that belongs to another sovereign nation. This is not going to reflect well on North Korea, and they will pay a price for this in the international community.
Sullivan told reporters the latest analysis showed Kim expects discussions about weapons to continue, including at leader level, perhaps even in person. The Kremlin said early on Tuesday it had nothing to say about statements by U.S. officials that Kim plans to travel to Russia this month to meet President Vladimir Putin for arms talks. If the trip happens, it would be Kim's first known visit abroad in more than 4 years and the first since the coronavirus pandemic. On Monday, Russia's defense minister Sergei Shoigu said the two countries are discussing the possibility of joint military exercises. Shoigu had visited Pyongyang in July to attend weapons displays that included North Korean ballistic missiles banned by the UN Security Council. At the Tuesday news briefing, Sullivan also took the chance to critique Russia's war efforts in Ukraine.
I think it says a lot that Russia is having to turn to a country like North Korea to seek to bolster its defense capacity in a war that it expected would be over in a week, that in September of 2023, it is going to North Korea to get munitions to try to continue to grind out on the battlefield in Ukraine.
He also pointed out the U.S. imposed targeted sanctions in mid-August to deter arms deals between North Korea and Russia, and called on Pyongyang to stick to its public commitments to not supply weapons for a war that is killing Ukrainians.
All right, let's quickly bring in Jamil Jaffer, who's the founder and executive director at the National Security Institute in the US. Many thanks to you, Jamil, for joining in. Now, a potential arms deal between North Korea and Russia may appear immediately as a transactional relationship. But is this the beginning of increased military cooperation between the two countries?
Well, it's obviously concerning, and that's what North Korea is certainly looking for. The Russians obviously need the artillery shells and the like to fight their war in Ukraine, but North Korea is looking for a relationship as well to get these advanced technologies, these capabilities that your correspondent was talking about, particularly in the ballistic missile and satellite domains where Russia is a leading player, as is India, and the North Koreans would love that technology. And so if they can build that relationship, provide Russia what it needs now for the war in Ukraine, with the hopes that they'll get that in the future, that's what North Korea is looking for in this relationship.
Absolutely. And when you talk about what North Korea is looking for, how can now Russia help in strengthening North Korea's weapons program?
Well, it's obviously deeply concerning because if you think about it, the North Koreans have already demonstrated the capability to successfully test a variety of nuclear weapons. In addition, we've seen longer and longer range ballistic missiles. We've seen them testing them and launching them into the seas off the coast of a number of U.S. allied and India allied nations. That's obviously a deep concern for all of the Indo-Pacific powers. A nuclear armed and ballistic missile capable North Korea is a problem. The Russians have excellent long distance ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missile technology, that if they were to supply the North Koreans with, it would allow them to not only launch those nuclear missiles further within range of not just India, but the United States and other allies as well, but also to launch advanced satellites into outer space and have a capability of surveillance and launch capability that's dramatically improved if the Russians were to share that capability with the North Koreans.
Right. The question is, would Russia be willing to go that far? But having said that, South Korea's intelligence service has briefed that Russia wants to hold joint naval drills with China, even North Korea. And that's going to be similar to those carried out by US, South Korea, and Japan. Now, what's the largest strategic message considering the divided geopolitical climate?
Well, I think what you're seeing is these globally repressive powers, countries like Russia, Iran, North Korea, China, increasingly cooperating with one another to expand their circles of influence and to cooperate with one another against what they see as a potential budding alliance among the Western states. Now, of course, the challenge for India is, what does India do in this space? It's always played sort of that middle ground. And India now is seeing the very real threat that China presents on its border. We see, as your correspondents were talking about earlier, both Russia and China choosing to skip the G20 summit. That's a huge problem and a huge challenge to India, and one that India needs to respond to by, in my view, cooperating more closely with the Quad powers and recognizing the very real threat that China poses on its border.